Welcome everyone to another session of Academy. We welcome back Rachel Vaughan for another interesting chat. And today we're going to be talking about the dark and light energy and the significance of Uluru, but I think probably more larger than that as well, as to what's going on in the world and in the spiritual energies and everything as well. So it's going to be fascinating. And Rachel, welcome back, and please let us know how you went up in Uluru, because that was the last time we spoke. You were just about to head up there, and I know that there was a big get together up there. So welcome back.
It was absolutely beautiful. So thanks for having me back. So I went to the Cosmic Consciousness Conference. It's a the alliteration is very hard to spit out. Run by Catherine and Mick, and it was just absolutely beautiful group of people. And the people that came along to watch were just amazing. The speakers were incredible, but the people that came to join with us were just stunning. And basically, when you get a group of people coming together, knowing that there's a big ascension going on, they want to learn, they're very open-minded, there's a really intelligent, open, aware people that know what's going on in the world, it just lifts the whole frequency that much more. So we had a ceremony, a solstice ceremony, and obviously, I was used in horrible rituals as a child, so anything to do with the solstices and equinoxes is pretty scary for me. But I learned through that beautiful coming together of a bunch of really lovely, like-minded souls in a gentle and, in a positive way, with all this positive thinking, that, you can do incredible magic in a place like that. And I'll talk about the significance of that particular location in a moment, and bring about something so powerful and positive. And it was an absolute, antithesis of what I'd gone through as a child. It was amazing. So for me personally, it was just absolutely transformational. That's the only way I can describe it. So I felt that, all of the damage that had been done to me on a soul level had been repaired through that one simple process. And it wasn't a long ceremony. That was amazing for me. Uluru sits in the crossing point of dragon lines. So there are ley lines all over the planet. Rory Duff, who's a geobiologist, amazing man, talks about there being at least one ley line within each square kilometre on the face of the Earth, and some areas are absolutely crisscrossed with them. And where you get the most powerful of those ley lines, the dragon lines are, there's only, there were 6 pairs up until 2017, I think it was, that another one came online. So there's an extra 3 that have come online. They usually come in pairs, so I'm expecting another one will come online after that. And I've got to credit my friend Alex for that one. Makes sense. So where these dragon lines cross, you get the chakra points on the Earth. So they do cross over the ocean, but where they cross on land, they're considered chakra points. So there's contention about whether or not Uluru is actually in the sacral chakra or the navel chakra, the sexual chakra or the navel chakra. In my opinion, it is the navel chakra, like the beginning of life. There's all these geographical features that a beautiful friend of mine, Robert Jameson, speaks about, and they make so much sense, with Wilpena Pound as the womb and Uluru as one of the ovaries. And it's interesting, the group of rocks, can't think of the name of them, the Olgas, just nearby, are almost like the filaments of the end of the fallopian tube. I mean, some of the the symbols and signs around there are just spectacular. So that rock sits right in the center of that. And so basically, where you get 2 dragon lines or any ley lines crossing, you get a portal space. You get a spherical space of 5th dimensional energy. And so that's where we're going at the moment. We've come into a 5th dimensional frequency on a planetary level. So Rory Duff, again, he spoke about this permanent harmony time of the ley lines coming up at this solstice. It has been reverberating out each time we have a solstice or equinox leading up to this. It was lasting longer and longer, this harmony time, but now it's permanent. Now, he's talked about that being for, hundreds of years. My downloads from my guides are that it could be permanent. So I guess that depends on the collective consciousness and where we go with it and what we do with it. But yeah, even at, we did the ceremony at Uluru, which was just beautiful. It's just singing. We sang the Lay Love Down song, which was awesome. We sang that 5 times. Number 5 in numerology is about freedom. And there was dancing and movement and song and sound. Didgeridoo was played by Rufus Rogie, and we had some sound healers there. And afterwards, we all went up after nightfall. and we're all just looking at the stars. And at one point I was lying on my back looking upward, and there was one part of the sky that had no stars in it. And I was staring at that particular spot directly above me, and I got these 3 massive flashes of light. I have no idea what they were. I don't think it was a drone or anything like that, because it was so far out into space, and it would have had to have been a pretty powerful light to do these 3 flashes. I felt like I got what I needed. So I want to describe it. I got the download or whatever it was needed. So I got up then and just went and hung out with my friends. But that was profound. So I don't know exactly what was going on there, except to say that I felt like I was being, it was a confirmation that what we'd done was really spectacular and really important and transformational.
Yeah. And so, one thing we touched on last time we chatted together was the idea of ley lines and, how Masonic lodges and different things line up and, these sorts of things. But, what you touched on there is also we can use them for good. Yeah. So they're neither good nor bad. They're what they are. And it depends on who understands it and who uses them as to, what we can do with it. So, I think a lot of the time we associate these things with bad, but there also is that good. And what does that then do? When you do something like ceremonial type, that has that good, that has the love, and you do that in that location, what's that do to, those things around us that we can't see?
So basically, well, when you look at, Indigenous peoples across the world, they've known the significance of these incredible energy lines, these electromagnetic lines of the Earth's, meridians, basically. Her chakras are where the dragon lines cross, but the ley lines are her meridians. And these energetic lines are extremely important for the health of the Earth and, subsequently for our health. So, Indigenous peoples have been doing ceremony in these spaces forever. It is important because our collective consciousness, along with animals, plants, insects, the collective consciousness of all living things reverberates back to the earth and tells her what we need. It's a bit like when you grow your own veggie patch and the plants attune to what you need from them, and they'll produce the right nutrients. And some people even put the seeds underneath their tongue to, put in their DNA and let the seeds know what they want. The earth is doing that for us all the time. And this is why we get so many negative projections from mainstream media. They want us to be thinking negatively and imbuing her with these negative frequencies, because she's a conscious entity. Elements are conscious as well, and they are taking in the collective consciousness. The beauty of what we're coming into at the moment with this 5th dimensional frequency shift is that it's very, very hard for people who are going through that shift, who are awake and aware, to get caught up in the nonsense. And as we go through, and at the moment it's intense, so I understand that, not everybody's above that yet. But as we go through this process over the next couple of years, there's going to be this 40-foot perspective for most people who are already awake and aware. We came into an astrological alignment of truth in November of 2023. And so we're well and truly into this process now where all the truth is coming out. It cannot be hidden. So every time something is done on the satanic level, and they try and make it sound like it's for this reason, it's very clearly, obviously, for other reasons that we're all aware of. And that collective consciousness is getting more and more aware of that. And that's why we're seeing, these fires in LA are just horrific. That's just another symbol of, or another, a sign of what a lot of people like myself have been predicting, that, that those that are losing power are just having a massive tantrum. So, and it's just horrible what's going on, but it's so obvious. I mean, they're not even trying to hide it. So as that happens and it gets more and more obvious, more and more people are going to fight back. And there's still a lot of us here. They're not going to get rid of as many people as they wanted to with the things in the arm either. So, and that's obvious. And that was, predicted that everybody would go in 2 years. Well, that's not the case, because souls can shift and heal the body in ways that, that medical science can't understand.
So some of these, Cal Washington, who I work with at Empower as well, he tells a story of going over to the UK, going over to London, and as he was walking through London, he sort of ended up close to Buckingham Palace, and then there was this portal that sort of opened up in front of him, and it was all this evil, and he didn't even sort of know what to do. He called up, there was a couple of other people who are on a part of Empower that are sort of spiritually, seers and different things, and they sort of worked on it together to sort of shut down this thing and all the rest of it. And So there's this idea of different portals that have access, I guess, access points for evil or good or whatever. And then I know that there's also people that travel the world doing some of this stuff as well. Like, and it seems to be a war on the physical to deal with what's happening in the spiritual. What's your experience with understanding that component of those that are doing that sort of work? I know that Cal doesn't run around the world doing that stuff. He was just presented with this situation and, followed what he was meant to do. But others actually do feel called to do those things. There was a group in Adelaide, South Australia, that I knew of that would walk through town and actually, go into the spirit and shut down some of the evil, that was. And they seemed very onto all of this stuff as well. So do you have much experience in that side of it?
Well, bless them. God, if anyone needs it, it's Adelaide. Obviously, I've got a bit of a bias. So with your friend Cal, I mean, what a darling. So he probably had some sort of ascension process just before that on a personal level. And then suddenly this portal opened up for him to clear because he was in the right place at the right time. And that is what we're seeing a lot with people now. People are recognizing how significant this work is. That's why, obviously, again, I've got a bias because of Lay Love Down, a movement to try and help people to understand how significant these lines are and how important it is to interact with them in a positive way. As far as the negative portals and the positive portals, you have, obviously we were talking about how, the Masons will put their temples and the churches and the arenas and the loosh harvesting, areas on the ley lines. All it really takes is people being conscious of the fact that they are doing that for a reason. And when they attend events there, having the consciousness, and this is the thing, when you are of the light, when you're a high soul frequency, your intentions are more intense and better at manifesting than those around you that are not awake and not at that frequency yet. So you can have one person going into an arena with a high enough frequency that can stop the loosh happening. So it's extremely important for people to be conscious and to go with their calling. A lot of us are getting this calling now to step up and do the work. As I was speaking to you before, a lot of us are very busy and, there's this inner drive to just keep moving, keep getting things done. It's because we're at a crux point. So those who are feeling that, and are actually acting on it, I bless them. I also understand there's a lot of people with the Ascension symptoms that we're going through that might be feeling really fatigued, and that's also understandable. You've got to be really careful and take really good care of yourself in that process as well. But it also helps to, when you're fatigued, sometimes it helps to actually do something kind for the body, like keep it moving, do dance or something like that, listen to really uplifting music, something along those lines to try and get everything moving again so you don't sort of get stuck in that malaise.
So without this is where my story actually started, like linking back to some things. I went to a place in Mexico where they had the pyramid type things over there, and we got taken on a tour, and obviously some of it links back to Aztecs, they say, and all of this stuff. And as you go up one of the pyramids, they had this altar, and they spoke about the sacrifice to the moon and the sun gods. That they used to do this on certain, most likely satanic, ritual type things, where they had, the pregnant women who would sacrifice on this location, and it meant nothing to me at that stage. I just went, okay, yep, that was back in the years ago that they did this. I might actually just share a screen of one of these locations. So this is in Mexico City.
Wow.
And they have these things that are very much like pyramids. And then I think it was sort of somewhere up here, one of these sort of things that they said that the altar, maybe this one over here. And, so I had no idea of any of this stuff at that stage. But what I've come to realize is that the stuff that they were doing back then is the same stuff that's being done now. There's no difference. Some of it's been hidden and changed, and but we're talking about the same stuff. We're talking about this ancient belief that there's power from these things of doing these evil things, that they get more power, and for whatever sick reason they do this, that they then are ascended in this world, I believe, not in the next, but in this world they get that. you know, which obviously links back to some of the SRA stuff and all of that type of thing as well. But is that your understanding, that we're dealing with the same thing from way back then as what we're dealing with now, just different names, different hidden agendas within it?
It's exactly the same. Yeah. So, you know, what's hidden under the Vatican in their archives is the playbook for all of these things that are still happening now. We're just not allowed to see what, you know, the ancients used to do. And so they've worked out that there's a formula, just like if you put certain things into a cup, you can make a Milo. You know, if you got a formula together, you can work out and get power in certain ways. The danger is that you know, it's so incredibly damaging to the soul of the people that are doing these things. I mean, they'll never recover from that if they got to the point of doing those sorts of sacrifices. That the soul's gone. It's been used as currency. So you get these empty vessels that are just so dark because they can't feel anything. They're just desperately trying to feel something. I mean, you know, I guess some people might feel sorry for them, but it's just a level of stupidity that's really hard to comprehend. What you just showed with that imagery is actually that stepped pyramid is what they use for the buildings for Planned Parenthood. So, you know, they're still doing the sacrifices. They're just not necessarily killing the host, the woman. They're still doing the process. It's exactly the same. They're just doing it on a, you know, an industrial level, which is rather horrific. So, and again, this is the thing with Satanists. They don't have anything new. When you give up your soul, you can't think of new things. You have to go on the same playbook over and over and over again. So again, you know, this is the danger, and this is a part of the reason why I talk about the sorts of things that I talk about with regards to my childhood. Is it's a warning to others that, you know, you go down this route, you're done on a soul level. Many people have gone through many cycles of, you know, 26,000 years just to get to the point of being here at this time on the earth. And they've wasted, they waste their whole soul and their whole ascension process to have a little bit of power here on earth. And the majority of the people that do these sorts of things, they don't really have any power. It's the people above them that have the power. There's no fealty in these echelons either. They don't have any kind of kindness to one another. They don't feel any kind of brotherhood. They call it a brotherhood. It's not. They're all fighting for that top position or just to stay alive. It's just madness. And on the flip side of that, you have people who work very hard through altruism and kindness, who want to do the right thing, who are absolutely abhor any kind of cruelty or physical abuse or anything along those lines. The beauty that we have at the moment, and we've had for, you know, for most of the time here on earth, we've had a really good positive balance in comparison to the dark. We're at least, you know, 12 good souls for every one dark soul, but that's going to absolutely go to a much higher level. We're going to double that, 24 souls to one, for instance. I don't know the exact numbers, but that's what I would assume, because we're getting to a process now where people will recognize the stupidity of, even, number one, they'll abhor doing anything like that naturally. But what happens is, if you get children and you abuse them early enough, you can sometimes take away their humanity. And that's what's been done. You know, that's what the whole process of MK Ultra is about. It's taking away the humanity of somebody and programming them so that they can control humans. And that's what the whole pandemic was about. They've done all of these studies, you know, even prior to the Nazi Second World War, they had all these studies on people and how to program them and control them. What they're going to really struggle with now is, with all of the different solar flares, the astrological alignments, the fact that we've gone to this fifth dimensional frequency upshift for the earth, and a lot of people getting to these higher frequencies, the programming is just not going to work. And so that they're definitely not going to win this war. It's just, we have to be very on point to have a very positive outlook, those of us who are awake and on the higher sort of soul frequency levels, to manifest an outcome that we want. Which is a lot of the reason why I speak up about the psychic stuff now. I hid that away for a long time because it can so easily discredit you, but I'm at the point now where it's so important. We've got to have a positive outlook.
Yeah, there's something that I've come to learn with all of this as well, and to me, like, this was as far as cuckoo as possible when I was in my, you know, cocoon in business world, you know, 9-10 years ago. But what I've come to learn, and, you know, I was very concerned spiritually to open myself up, because I was worried about the churches and the hypocrisy and all of that sort of stuff that I saw there. And so, obviously the more research you do, you mentioned the Catholic Church and, some of the evil of the entities that are behind this. And it seems to be, if you go far enough into the religious side, you get to the same stuff, Satanism, Luciferianism, whatever you want to say in that side. But then, there's not the other end that's good either. So as you start to go down the new age stuff, you get to the exact same part. So it's, that's what they're messing with too. And I'll play a clip in a moment and get your opinion on it. But then it's like both have been hijacked at either end. And you could probably say that of politics as well, the far right and the far left, right? It's always this, idea that there isn't one end that's, I think there is good and bad, by the way, but, that's probably the only continuum. But the idea of where we sort of understand this information, it's somewhere in between, new age and that stuff. And it's somewhere in between religion to this part of spiritual understanding and learning for yourself to discern the good and the bad and spit out the not good stuff and really coming into our own understanding. That's the big part of all of this, because both have been not only hijacked, but they've also been corrupted to certain words and certain triggers and certain things that you don't go on a spiritual journey at all. You just sit there and go, you know what, I'm an atheist, I'm an agnostic, I'm going to sit back and I'm just going to, you guys are both crazy. And, but it's then coming through, I guess, to that authentic part of what's real in between and having the faith in yourself to delve and look into what that is. Any thoughts on that side?
Yeah, it's so frustrating because you've got the two extremes. You've got the religion that says you can't touch anything psychic because it's evil, because they want to have control. And then you've got the new age where it's all just love and light and you don't look at any of the dark stuff. And that's the worst possible, extremes of both sides. And yet we're born with a pineal gland. And we can pick up on we can see and feel and connect with otherworldly entities and energies and the earth energies and all of those things, because it's a God-given right, because we have the capability of doing that. I obviously, as a psychic, I'm biased, so I really believe that it's important to develop those abilities. The reason I think it's so important is because we've got the abilities, and if we are not armed and know how to protect ourselves, the dark knows how to do it. They know how to attack us. If we're not, taking into account all of the things that we need to take into account on a daily basis to keep ourselves safe and well, and those that we love and protect, then we're just sitting ducks. So there has to be a middle ground. So I'm not a fan of religion because it takes away all of those abilities and rights. Generally, most of the main religions take all of that away. And they relegate it to a priest or somebody else, and that's just been completely corrupted. I mean, the priests are the scariest, most dangerous people when children are concerned. So there has to be what I think needs to happen, and I think will definitely be happening, is people are going to take it right back down to what are these experiences that I'm having on a personal level. Am I seeing the future before it happens? Well, in that case, could that be of use to humanity? Or, can I commune with otherworldly entities like souls that have passed over? And could that help people? Could I be a medium for people to get those answers for when, they've lost somebody that they loved? And a lot of people really need that when someone's passed over. If they've got everything blocked off and they can't get messages through, just knowing that soul is okay can be such a blessing. So we have all these God-given gifts or, innate gifts that can be so incredibly helpful to others and to ourselves and to the animals and to the plants and to the earth. I mean, just learning about where ley lines are, you can go in and bring in a positive frequency and know that you're making a difference. Just going out and singing or dancing or playing, hitting a tuning fork or, playing 432 hertz music, whatever it is, playing your guitar, a didgeridoo, whatever it is. It's a small act, but it makes such a difference. It's a massive difference. So obviously the whole new age movement was designed because they knew that we're coming into this time and they wanted to scare the hell out of people to try and steer them away from what is inevitably going to happen. It just depends on how quickly we want to do it, because if we do it collectively on a conscious level and think about the positive outcome that we want, the positive world that we want, we can do it actually very quickly. But the new age movement was designed so that we'd be very passive and just sit back and wait for somebody else to come fix it. which isn't going to happen. We have to do it ourselves.
Yeah. The other thing that I see right across, from science to tell us, that we're insignificant, that we're millions and millions of years ago, and all of these different things. And, I think a lot of the traumas that are forced upon people are also to make people feel like they're not special, that they don't have that power, so that they don't actually then tune into that. So if they get any sort of inkling that they've got something, or, and I think everybody has something to bring in this way, but there's some that have been given gifts that are completely ignoring them because they don't want to receive those gifts or those blessings. And they also want to doubt themselves. Oh, I didn't really see that. I must be crazy. I didn't really feel this. My intuition wasn't this. And they're not, I guess, exercising, learning how to utilize those other senses to be able to then fully go into that. So I think that there is a really strong program of making people feel crazy, insignificant. You're nothing. How could you? And then they put people like yourself up on a pedestal, and they go, well, Rachel can see this, and then they put themselves down. Well, I can't do it. I can't do what Rachel does, or I can't have that experience. So what would you say to those people who are doubting themselves that they have anything special to bring in that capacity?
Everybody is special. Everybody has something about them that is special. So and thank you for bringing that up, because it drives me crazy. So no one should worship anybody or put anybody on a pedestal at all. And on the opposite end of that, there's the Satanists, believing that they are the number one and they're the most important person in the world. So there's got to be a middle ground. Everybody can learn how to open themselves up psychically in a safe way. For instance, teaching people how to read auras. I'm astonished at how many people pick it up. It's not difficult. Just about everybody can learn how to read the etheric part of the aura. And that's one of the most important parts, because that'll tell you how well that person is. So we have the ability to see ley lines as well. It's in our retinas. We have these cryptochromes, so we can see ley lines. So it's really, really easy to learn these concepts. The difficulty, I think, is people having self-doubt. And obviously, we've got psychiatry that's been put out there to make sure that we don't develop those things. I mean, the number one joke in my household as a child, growing up with a satanic cult, was, be careful what you say, because the men in white coats will come and get you. Well, I was abused by men in white coats. So that was a joke that was getting around in the 70s and 80s. But, in my life, it was a reality. And this is something that people still are afraid of now. And I know a lot of people who went through similar abuse to me, who can't speak out or feel they can't speak out, understandably, because they have that, that onus of, they'll just get shoved in a mental institution. And I know many who have.
And they've been traumatized to keep them in that state as well of trauma, and re-traumatized as well. I spent a lot of time, thousands of hours probably, with Fiona Barnett and going through, and we were working on a bunch of things as well. So I learned a lot about those programs, and maybe I will get you back on if you're open to chatting about some of those things more in depth. I'm not quite sure how comfortable you feel on that stuff, but it's awful and horrific what's going on. But to me, it was probably one of the first things that I looked into and went really down that rabbit hole. And, I think it helped me to understand the world. And I then probably opened myself up spiritually, because I went, if they're doing this evil and they're in these positions of power, and why are they doing that? Then there must be the good. And so then I started searching for the good. So for me, it was a very important part of my journey to go down that rabbit hole, to then understand that there's obviously, the good and the bad, and how do we tap into that good?
Yeah, it's a very, I often feel, I feel sorry for people, because they'll come to me and say, I didn't know about any of this stuff until I saw your stuff. Now it's more frequently that they've seen a few other people at least. So, because a lot of people are speaking up about the dark stuff now. It's not something that I would wish on people to have to wake up to this stuff. But if we don't know how the world is run, then we're never really going to understand anything. So if you don't realize that this is how, through blackmail operations with children, that people, get compromised all over the world, and they're the ones that are supposedly in power, you don't understand that, you're not going to understand why they use a particular intonation when they tell you the news, because it's a type of hypnosis. You know, you won't understand the true reality of what's actually going on. You're going to be in this sub-reality where you think everything's just fine, which, you know, bless people for having that experience. I envy them to a degree.
Well, that's that love and life, you know, everything's amazing type situation as well, isn't it? It's where and then we don't act and we don't do anything. But I think, you know, there's a part of going down that rabbit hole. And for me, it took me to a dark place, and it wasn't good to stay there and to try to work there. And, you know, so realizing that you're not going to find good by staying there in that place.
No.
But, you know, utilizing it to help you on that journey, I think, is an important thing. And being aware of what's going on. And I think that has helped me look at the world in a very different way, and to look at everything and go, I see what you're doing now. I see your game, and it's really not that clever. You know, like in some ways I call it evilly brilliant. But in other ways, it's just because of the mass hypnosis. But in other ways, as you mentioned before, it's the same playbook. So once you see it, it's very hard to not see it when it's there.
Yeah, yeah. And, you know, we're seeing that with these fires in LA at the moment. It's exactly the same playbook as what they did in Hawaii and elsewhere. So my big thing at the moment is I keep being shown on a psychic level that eventually they're going to try and do one of these things, and it's going to actually, collective consciousness is going to actually aim it back at the device that they're trying to send these things out with, and that's going to start destroying the devices. I don't think we're far off from that. I was hoping it would have happened by now, but it's pretty close. So the comeuppance that is coming for those that are doing these sorts of things, it's hot on their heels at the moment. It's coming fast.
Yeah, I want to share another video here. So this is talking about the new age. I found this really interesting. It was sent to me recently. I'll just make it full screen.
For you to join this conversation. We are going to be talking about blood, covenants, witchcraft, sexuality. I don't know what we're going to get into, but I've got some really incredible friends here. And so what we're going to do, just to jump it off, is would you all be willing to go around and give an introduction? And many of you watching, these are going to be familiar faces, but by the time it's over, I'm praying that you get connected into their channels, because
I think I'll just go back to the start. Hang on.
I could manifest anything I wanted, my relationship, my house, money I wanted, all using blood spell. There's a demonic revelation, a counterfeit revelation of the blood in the New Age. But the main thing I would do is actually cover my whole body in my blood. My first official blood sacrifice to the devil was abortion. I would always get whatever I prayed for.
I didn't necessarily come out, I was almost there. My heaviest struggle was getting out of pain.
This is why your testimony is so triggering to the community you came from, because I was trying to figure out, who am I? Why am I on this planet?
We're getting to roots real quick. Right now, everybody's trying to define themselves. And I think the burden of this generation is...
If you found the truth, you wouldn't still have this huge burning question mark in your soul. I lost my house, my relationships with my friends, all my money. I'm literally writing, I released my depression, and I'm giving it to the devil. And then guess what he did with it?
We're exposing a deception.
Witchcraft works and sin feels good. The devil will give you whatever you want, but of course you pay with your soul.
Hey, I'm so...
I just want to stop share on that one. But I found this really interesting, because it went down the new age part, and it went down also the LGBTQ sort of scenario of where that goes. And they were talking about how both felt that they had been deceived, and that, that they had been taken down this track. And a couple of the women were talking about what they did with their menstrual blood, and they did this. And then it took them quite a while to work out the link back to, Satanism and, these other sacrifices, but it was hidden under the new age. And then the other group were talking about the same thing. And, I think it's important for people to be aware. And that's why I was saying about the new age, it goes back to the same thing. It's just another, hidden agenda if you go down that part. And it's not to say there's not truth in these things, there's not power in these things. It's what price do you pay to receive these things? And I think that that's a really critical conversation, because we can't ignore it, because it's evident that, you know, these things, whether it be done in New Age, the churches, the Masons, the whoever who are doing these different things, they seem to be getting some sort of power and getting, you know, things in this world, but the price of what they're paying overall, I think, you know, the way I see it is that we have a soul, and that's a forever thing. And so giving up the forever thing for this, you know, small time on this whatever we're on, to try to get those things. And we're constantly sold that, right? The car, the house, the whatever. And you know, when I did some work with a guy called Isaac Cappy. I'm not sure if you're familiar with Isaac. And he got when he came out to Australia, he stayed with me, and then he stayed with Fiona for a bit. But he was talking about what his offer was, and his offer from you know, the Illuminati was a car, a house, and $250,000 a year. I was in an email, and this was the offer come in. And so it's interesting what, you know, we're told that is important, these materialistic things. And, you know, if you don't have that belief that there's something deeper or something worth that's for eternity, that, you know, if you have no belief in that spiritual reality, well, who cares if the world just goes black? Who cares if you do something bad? You know, you might as well have the car, have the house, because once you die, it just goes black. So if you don't have these stronger beliefs, then you can see why people think, well, I might as well enjoy my time while I'm here. And
it's
so
interesting you said goes black, because as a medium, when I connect with souls that are dark, like my father, for instance, he's in the black, literally. So, you know, that is what's waiting for those that do those sorts of things. So there are a whole lot of really high level souls on this planet who choose not to be human, because being human can be incredibly corrupting. And one of the main reasons is because we get all caught up in the physical, on, you know, and all the things that we can have, and the pretty trinkets. And, you know, a lot of animals just live on a subsistence existence, that every day is whether or not they get food, whether or not they get shelter. It's on that day whether or not it happens. They're not looking 20 years ahead. We get stuck in that. So the most important thing with a lifetime as a human being is not getting caught up with all of those things, not getting caught up with the money and all the rest of it. And, you know, it's obviously hard when you've got a physical body. You want to have a house at least. But jeepers, poor old Isaac, he didn't get much of an offer, did he? So you can, what that woman was saying about, you know, she could manifest this, she could manifest that. You don't need to do those horrible things. You just think about what you want, live your life as a good person, try and help people, and think about the positive outcomes that you want to have. And as long as you're not obsessing over, I want, you know, a really expensive car and a really expensive house, if you just want things that are normal that you might need, like, you know, to be able to earn enough money to pay off your house, which, you know, as long as it's not some ridiculous mansion, you can have all of those things. You can manifest that with the positive outlook. There's no need to do anything with blood or any of that other creepy stuff that's totally unnecessary. You know, people get really hung up on what is manifesting. So manifesting is just not getting caught up in the people telling you, you can't do this and you can't do that because, you know, you're not good enough, or you're not special enough, or you don't have gifts, or, you know, people will judge you. That's what you've got to get past. And you can manifest whatever you need. I just would warn people, don't try and manifest the ridiculous. You know, why would you need to have a house that covered several acres? If it's just you and a couple of other people, that's obscene. And, you know, I don't know how people can live with themselves in those sorts of situations anyway. Multi-million-dollar houses when people are starving on the other side of the world. I don't know how they could cope with that, but that's the problem. When you sell your soul, they are so devoid of any kind of joy. That's the only thing they can do. And that is because it harnesses other people's worship energy. So, you know, so you see all these people in these celebrity situations, they don't have any joy. They can only harvest other people's loosh to get joy.
And you actually see that in the creative side as well. And I think that the way in which they control, like Hollywood and the music industry and all of those things, you can see, you know, the ones who are going down that sort of pathway, there's nothing really creative in what they're doing. unless they're stealing it from somebody else who's creative and hasn't sold their soul and done that. So they need the creatives to be able to bring this through, because there's nothing in it for them to be able to, you know, I guess. And I then ask myself, where's that creative energy coming from? Is it coming from the good, and therefore that's why they can't get it? And you know, if you're not corrupted, and you can have that creative energy. So is it your thought as the creative, or is that, are you know, a portal for that creative idea and energy to come through to bring forward?
Well, that can be the case. So, you know, you look at all of the great geniuses of the world, or those that we're told were the great geniuses, and I'll use Isaac Newton as an example. During his lifetime, he didn't talk about having these otherworldly experiences, but after he died, about 250 years after his death, papers came out where he explained that, you know, a lot of his inspirations came from somewhere else, from God or whatever he described, you know, as some other worldly entity. From my understanding, with those that contact the demonic and want something from them, like say they might get a one-hit wonder. If they want to be a musician, they might have this one download of a song, but that will cost their soul for one song. You know, people are just stupid. So, but I think it's because they just don't realize the significance of what they're doing. And because we're sold this lie that, you know, that those that are in the public eye, who have, you know, all of this money and celebrity and a flashy car, that they're happy, that that's something to aspire to. And it's actually the absolute opposite. What we should be aspiring to is those that, you know, don't need all of that stuff, because they're happy in themselves, because they're doing something in their life that means something to them, that has meaning. And usually that's altruism.
Yeah. I had an adventure company for quite a while, and still do. I haven't done anything for a little while, but the happiest people I saw was in like Papua New Guinea and Nepal, and they had, you know, they had nothing. Yeah. And they would be skipping down, holding your hand, you know, down the mountain, and just cracking jokes, and it was just so refreshing. And yet they've got, like, what we would perceive was, you know, you don't have anything. You're sharing it with your mum and dad and your whole family, this house, and you're doing this. But they were so happy. And then the wealthy people that I've come across, there's no one that I've said, I want your life. You know, like, I wouldn't mind their boat or their whatever, but I don't want their life, because they don't feel happy. And I think in that little clip that I shared just before, that they mentioned the word emptiness, and there's this emptiness in striving for that, because that's not where you get filled. You don't get fulfilled by doing these things, but that's the lie that we're sold.
Yeah, so it's the flashy car and the flashy house, because other people would aspire to it and make that person feel like they're special because they've got those things, but there's nothing special about it. Anybody can do that, but it will cost them greatly, and it's certainly not worth it.
So let's go on to another part, because our last conversation was just after the festival that we had, and I found this a really interesting observation, because we got feedback from people as well, and it was incredible feedback that we got, and I felt this energy, this uplifting part, and to me it was an ascension type thing of what we're talking about, and then, you know, there was some negative comments on this page, and it said I felt strange, I felt this, and there was just a handful of them, and I thought that was really interesting, because if you were there, I would have thought that you would have felt that. But then, you know, something that I think that you understand quite well is that if you've got something either attached to you, or you've got some beliefs, or you've got whatever, and as that ascension, you know, occurs because of such an uplifting environment, you're going to feel uncomfortable. You're going to feel like whatever that interaction, or those beings that are trying to influence you, are going to struggle against that good. Yeah. And it's going to be, you know, a conflict of sorts in that spiritual realm, and you're going to feel uncomfortable. And so there was that experience. And then there was something that you mentioned about pets can see this thing. And I was actually, so after the festival, I went up to Cairns, and I went up diving and did some stuff, and I took my dog. So the dog went to the festival, and for about 2 weeks after, I thought that someone had kicked my dog, because he was really timid. He would usually sleep on our bed, and he would sort of hide in the corner, and then I'd call him over. He'd usually come straight over to me, and he'd sort of look at me and go away. And then I thought, that's really strange. And then I'm searching for ticks on him, and I'm like, maybe he got bitten or something else. And then you mentioned about the, you know, the aura that they sort of see, that they see you differently. And it started to make sense, because it was after about 2 weeks he came back normal.
Okay.
But I think that there was a ascension process, and I think some people experienced it, or maybe a lot of people at the festival, and I certainly did, as being one of the organizers. And then after that, my dog didn't see, and my wife was there as well, and it was the same sort of thing for my wife, that I don't think the dog saw us in the same way. And I think it was like, what are these, you know, people there? It's the same voice, but it's, you know, I see them differently. And then there was a settling of that. And that made sense after our last chat. So I thought that was a really interesting experience. And you've spoken about how these entities are, you know, screaming out, or you can hear them struggling on this part. So I just want to delve into that side of it, you know, this idea that as we have this separation between these things, we're also going to see some strange things. We might hear some strange things, and we're going to experience some amazing things. But do you want to just tap into that idea a little bit further?
It makes perfect sense to me, Dave, that you would have gone to a higher frequency. And I can't remember, because I can read your aura now, but I don't remember if I saw it in the last time we were speaking, because I usually try not to look because it's none of my business, but I can see it's really clear. So it would make sense that you've gone up a level, because basically doing something like that, bringing all those people together, that was a test for you. And obviously you succeeded. You did really well. Those that had a negative experience probably all either were holding themselves back from getting up to a higher frequency, and they would have felt really, it would have been very uncomfortable for them. Very, very intense. So I would be, you know, I'd be interested to see how many of them were dragged along by a friend or a partner, or I didn't really want to be there and they didn't really feel like it was their space. I would say most of the people would have had some sort of upgrade going to that festival. That's the whole purpose of it. And it does make sense that your dog might not have recognized you, because the level that you're at now is a very different frequency from the one you would have been at before. And your job at the moment, by the way, is to be this inspiration for those that are coming up to your frequency level. So it makes perfect sense, again, that you're, you know, part of this organization, this movement. That all makes perfect sense. A lot of people are getting to this frequency now. So it's a really good sign. It's a really good sign. A lot of babies are coming in at even higher levels. So that's another really good sign that we're on the right trajectory. We're going in the right direction. One thing I just wanted to point out, as people get to a higher ascension, and it's going to be much easier to get to that ascension to go up to higher and higher levels now that we've come into this fifth dimensional frequency for the earth, there are going to be people around us that are not going to be able to cope with it. They've either because they've got an attachment, or they don't want to deal with their stuff. They may have trauma. Everybody's got trauma. And they might not be able to cope with it. So they're just going to get more and more triggers, and they're probably going to get more and more distressed until they do the work that they need to do to go up a level. And that's what we were going to sort of talk about with the ascension symptoms that people are going through at the moment. There's a whole cascade of symptoms that people are dealing with, not only from the fact that we've come up to this, you know, higher frequency on an earth plane. So there's that frequency shift, but there's also a lot of people going up levels personally. And when you do the two things at once, and I've noticed that a lot of people seem to be all doing it at the same time at the moment, sometimes it feels a little bit like it's kind of like, it's always a choice, but it might feel for some people like it's being forced on them. So if people are having, you know, intolerances to food, not being able to drink alcohol, you know, skin problems, or, you know, just all of a sudden, all of these things coming up, you know, nausea, dizziness, headaches, that can be because of the Schumann resonance going off, or solar flares, or because we've come into a higher frequency. But that can also happen when you're going up on a level, on a soul level as well. So it's pretty intense. What I'll say to people, it's going to be short-lived. So you don't have to worry about it going on forever. And as each frequency is achieved, obviously the Earth's going through her frequency, and that, you know, shift, and that'll take as long as she needs it to take. But on a personal level, as we go through those shifts, we've got to be really, really kind to ourselves and take really good care of our bodies. So that means, you know, for those who are still, you know, imbibing of fluoride in the water, you know, get a filter if you can, or drink rainwater, or find some other way to get your water, because fluoride at the moment is going to be like a poison. It's worse than it would have been before because of the frequency we've come into. So those sorts of things are really very important to get away from as much as possible. So those things like alcohol, like pharmaceutical drugs that are, designed to harm, they're that much more intense, and they're going to have that much more of an effect now than they did before, whether a person's going through their own ascension or not, because we've come into a 5D paradigm. And that's just natural, because we're not supposed to be touching those things. They're all oil-based, and they're not natural. They're toxic. I'm talking about pharma medicines particularly. One thing I've noticed with a lot of people is vision changes. A lot of people are complaining about the fact that they can't see as well. I can't see as well. And that's across the board, which is really interesting. So I think that's the fact that we've come to a 5th dimensional frequency. We've come up. There's a gentleman called Matt Roschke, or Roschke. I can never quite work out how to say his surname. He talks about sun gazing, and I don't know enough about it to suggest it, because obviously we've always been told don't look at the sun. And I think he says to do it in degrees, but apparently that can help with those vision problems. That can actually improve them. So I'm yet to try it, but I'm curious to try it. But yeah, there's going to be a lot of physical symptoms that come with this. And my suggestion is also to spend as much time in nature as possible while we go through that process. So, sitting in front of a screen all the time, although they're useful for these sorts of things, that will also become more and more uncomfortable. So a lot of people are going to have to shift their vocations as well. For those of us getting to higher levels, doing the same thing that we were doing 2-3 years ago and not listening to the inner calling, that will become impossible. So my suggestion is for people to find out what it is that they really, really want to do with their life. Or what did they want to do when they were a kid? What did they always, avoid doing because people told them they couldn't do it, because they would never achieve it, and go for it. If it makes your heart sing, that's what you need to be doing now. And pushing against that and going, and being stuck in a rut just won't work for people. It'll just drive them crazy.
Well, what do you think of the element of then having, things go wrong or attacks after these ascensions? Because so Nico, who came up, who's on the platform, he went back and he explains that the festival for him was probably the best time he's ever had in his whole life. His kids, his wife, everyone's happy all at once. And he went back and both his laptops died, straight after another. And so we were talking about this, and then Sky, who was she had a legal battle, and she ended up having all of these attacks. And I've had some stuff as well, and there's quite a few people I've spoken to, and then there was all this good as well. So there was both. But I found it very interesting that a lot of people who then had these experiences, these really big experiences, then also had something when they went back that it was almost, and it's almost like laughable in the fact that it can't really do anything because you're already at that frequency. But it's like interesting to observe that that these things that just don't quite make sense, and life's a bit harder, and those sorts of things. Is there anything there that you want to touch on?
So with the computer factor, so if he had gotten to, say, the gold soul frequency, that is a really common problem for people who've got to that frequency. They'll interfere with their computers, so they'll blow them up. One thing you might want to ask him next time you see him is, do lights flash around him? Does he drive under street lights and they turn on and off? Those sorts of things. So it's a form of telekinesis. So you get to that high level and you start to interfere with things. And there's ways to stop that from happening. But it's a little bit like, poltergeist activity normally in a house is usually caused by an adolescent girl. It can be another worldly entity coming in to attack that girl, but it uses the girl going from, a child to pubescent. That frequency, that energy, that loose energy is used for the manifestations. So most of those manifestations only happen in houses with adolescent girls, adolescent boys as well, but mostly girls. So if you think about that, everything is energy and frequency. So the Christ consciousness level, the gold soul level, interferes with things telekinetically. And once you get to the next level, which for most souls going through that trajectory would be a blue crystalline frequency, there is an understanding of how to ameliorate those sorts of issues so they don't happen anymore. And my suggestion for people who are going through that process is to have a piece of orgone between you and your computer, or between you and whatever it is that you're working with that you don't want to interfere with if it happens more than once. If you did it to 2 computers at once. It could also be a sign for him he's not supposed to be on his computer all the time, or that some work that he was doing on his computer wasn't the right place for him to go. The problem with ascending is there's always another level to go to. So if you're in a really good trajectory and you're doing all the work that you need to do and you're dealing with your traumas and you're growing, sometimes on a higher soul level, you'll think, well, let's get some more challenges in here, get this rolling and keep going up. Because the whole point of being here is to get to these high levels. We're not here to accrue things. We're here to accrue soul frequency, get to higher and higher levels of wisdom and, altruism again, to help others. So yeah, it's I'm glad you said that it was, somewhat amusing. At the time, it's not that amusing, but you can look at it.
It is, because if that's the best that they've got, that's how I look at it. It's like, okay, you don't have as much power as you projected to have. And, it's like what you were talking about before, that the white, the light energy, it can't fight against that. And we're told to fear this. And, we've spoken about this before, about the fear and keeping us in that state so we don't. I find it somewhat amusing now when I see this stuff, and it's like, I see you for what you are, and that's, and therefore it's almost like a tick of approval. I'm on the right track, so I take it more of that side.
And that's actually like the number one, like the catch cry for your frequency at the moment too, is that 40-foot perspective, and nothing really touches you. So again, just to touch on the possibility that it was some sort of attack from some entity, which would make perfect sense. I mean, look at how uplifted all these people were. How dare you? I had a psychic attack recently. I went into a church that's on a ley line, and the people in the church are being uplifted by, I was singing in a choir, and this entity had a full go at me, and I just did what I needed to do, because you can get rid of these things. It's actually not that difficult. But I found that, amusing, because it was just ridiculous, because obviously that entity wanted the loose energy from this congregation, and they were really positively uplifted by the sound of the choir singing. And I normally wouldn't sing, in a church, by the way, and I'm not religious at all. It was just the venue that we were at. So, entities will try and come in and have a go for sure, but you've obviously got to a point where it wasn't affecting you. I'm hoping that your friends also had the same sort of, outlook that, this is not fun, but it's obviously for a reason.
Oh yeah, it affected me for sure. The stuff on me, but the deeper I went into that was that I think I was asking for that to be revealed, as in what you were saying, like trying to jump ahead and sort of, because to me, I can't fully, sit on here and talk about this stuff if I haven't somewhat experienced it to be true, because then it's just me talking someone else's opinion.
Yeah.
So for me, like experiencing some of those things is something that I've probably asked for in some capacity, so that I can then talk from my heart and say it's truth. This is authentically my truth as to how this all works, because I've experienced this. And so for me, I think it was more of that journey. We've got a couple of people asking, what do you do to get rid of them? Or if you're experiencing those things, you said that it's quite easy. What would you do?
So I would, if it doesn't matter whether or not you can see these entities, you don't have to be have that visual sense. And most people only see otherworldly entities through the corners of the eyes. There's a combination of rods and cones in the peripheral vision that pick up on ultraviolet and infrared. So your dark souls tend to be in the infrared bandwidth, and your light souls in your ultraviolet. So if you see things that are white or bright light, that's usually a positive thing. But if you see dark shadows and things, that's usually something dark. So if you pick up something like that, what you can do is visualize in your mind's eye what that might look like. And, it's amazing how much we can pick up on what these things actually look like, whether or not we can see them full on or not. And some psychics can see things full on, and I have before, but it's not my daily, I don't daily see, souls running around. And you basically, with that visualization, you imagine that entity turning to gold dust, pixelating into gold fragments, and with the intent that you send it back to source. So what happens there is that entity then has to go back and start its incarnations all over again. Or if it doesn't want to do that, it will go to hell where it belongs, or a dark dimension where it belongs. So there's multiple dark dimensions. So it depends which one it belongs to. It's kindest to send it back to source to start again. I always try to look on the kind, try to be the kind soul rather than the vengeful soul. So if you send them back to source, if you do that once or twice, somehow the word gets around and they leave you alone and they don't keep coming at you. It's very effective.
And that's the same,
but it's very effective.
And that's the same for hexes and, spells and all of that sort of stuff. If people are into that stuff and they do that to you by sending it back, does that go back to the person who does the spell, or does that go back to what the entity is originated from?
So with what I help people do, I get them to say self-affirmations to undo. So I don't actually tell them to send it necessarily back unless it's necessary. But for the most part, and there's a shielding that you can do so that can't get you in the first place. But for instance, with the people who are from Masonic family lines, there's a way through self-affirmations of completely clearing that curse energy, because Masons curse their family lines. And if you're in a Masonic line and you don't feel cursed, then you probably aren't. So I don't want to put that on people, but it's just, you can clear it very simply and easily, because we're the arbiters of the rights that that these entities have over us. We give our power away too easily. So if we decide we don't want to have anything to do with something that some other soul's decided for us, past lineage, we can shift that and change it. I do put up shields where I ask that any negative intentions that might be sent to me are sent back to the intender. So that would definitely go back to the intender. So that goes back to that person. But if they're working with an entity that's telling them to do those things, and in some circumstances, those people, if they're traumatized enough, it's not even really their full intent to do it, they're just acting out, then it would go to the entity. So there's universal laws that would send it back to where it actually deserves to go, because that's your intent to do that.
So coming back to that idea that you should take it as a bit of a positive, this idea, and to me, like that, this is everything. What it's about is looking for the blessing in things rather than looking for the negative, and then focusing on the blessing. But when I see that stuff, and this is to try to encourage people that are going through these things and maybe experiencing it, it may be to send you off track, and that you need to push deeper into whatever you're doing, because right now you're on the right track. And so sometimes people, would get discouraged from this experience that they're dealing with in the physical or the spiritual, but you might want to just reframe that and go, okay, I must be doing something right. Otherwise I wouldn't be receiving, these things to try to take me off.
And use it as a litmus test. So say you're planning to do something that's a different kind of work for you, that's something you've always really wanted to do, and suddenly you get pushback out of just nowhere where you wouldn't have expected it. Ask yourself, is that a warning, or is that actually just give you more incentive to do it? Because if it gives you more incentive to do it, then that's a sign that that's actually probably been, it might be someone trying to pull the rug out from under you, but it shows you what you actually really want. So it's a blessing.
Mm.
So
I always feed off that negative. To me, it's like an incentive. And it's the same in anything I've done. If someone tells me I can't do it, that just makes me want to do it so much to prove them wrong, and to just let that light shine. So to me, I've always fed off that. And so I also see, in the spiritual stuff, if you get that stuff, then you can use it to feed you, to push you further forward.
Absolutely. Yeah. So don't let the negatives, deter you, because if you've got a calling and you've got this, gut feeling that there's something really important that you have to do, as long as it's not to harm anybody else, then it's obviously it's important and needs to be done. And there will be pushback. There usually is, whether it's from family or people who are jealous because they don't want you to achieve that, or you're showing them up somehow, whatever it might be. Just stay on your path and keep visualizing that you're going to achieve what you want to achieve, and that's how you get there. You don't have to do any of this blood ritual stuff, and God no, sex magic, none of that's necessary. It's to me, that's just an absolute distraction away from it, because then you're just giving the energy to somebody else. It's ridiculous.
I think that's a really important point as well that you mentioned about other family or friends or whatever, because often once you sort of get to that stage of protection or whatever, and they can't get to you directly, it will come indirectly through those who are not there yet or whatever. And and often it works off their traumas, like a trigger, you know, using their traumas to do that. And you can see it. Sometimes you can see it in their eyes when you're talking to them. It doesn't look like they're there, or there's something different about them. But you have these experiences, and I feel sorry for them in that I know that they're, you know, it's not really them. I try to take away, you know, who they are, because sometimes, you know, their intent, they're not that person, but they're acting in this way and they're being influenced by this stuff. And, you know, I find that that's a really good thing, is to try to separate. It's not personal. It's, you know, they're trying to take you off track, but it's not them. It's the spirits that are interacting with them. It's their, whatever they're sort of into, that's trying to get to you, because it can't get to you directly. And so the more you sort of see that, I think that that's a really important thing to realize, because a lot of people take that personally. My sister did this, or my dad said this, and it's really quite awful things that, you know, can come out. But it's designed to, I think sometimes they can see your deepest wounds, these entities, and they use that to
absolutely do.
Really get to you. And they go, and that's where you've got to deal with your traumas, I think, as well.
Yeah, exactly. And this is the thing, when you have a certain path and there's a mission, you've got a mission, and I'm always hoping that it's altruistic. If you have people around you who have addictions, and addictions can come in many different forms, addictive habits are usually trauma related, or almost always trauma based. So that means that that person has, they're doing something automatically, which means they're kind of not really fully in their body. And that's where you can get an attachment coming that will attack you through that person. So it's not a matter of being unkind, but it's kind of not to be surrounded by people who are having those sorts of, acting out in that way and having those addictive personality situations, because they'll get attacked in an attempt to attack you by some sort of negative entity that's trying to get to you. So it's not a matter of being judging others as such, but you do need to be a little bit more careful the more you ascend, that you don't allow people to be targeted around you that are automatic thinkers, that are doing these things without even thinking, because they can then be a conduit and they can get abused just because you're trying to achieve something, which is really, really distressing.
And what would you suggest in that situation? You just need to sort of remove yourself a little bit from them, so that they're, you know, or do you then try to put protection around them as well? What would you suggest for those that are, I guess, being traumatized to traumatize you?
I mean, using the protection for others can help to a degree, and we always have the right to do that with our children until they're adults. But others, if they don't want that protection, they can push it away. So it's kind of pointless. But you can try, you know, it might make you feel good to know that you're trying at least to do that. The idea is, if you do have those people around you for whatever reason, do not react to what they're doing. And that way, hopefully the entity or whatever it is that's trying to work through them will lose interest and go through somebody else. But it's your reactivity. So if you like to rescue people and you've got someone you're trying to rescue, you're just going to cause them a great deal of misery because they need to rescue themselves. So that's just an example, you know, and a lot of people, you know, want to go around and help people, but they get attacked as a result because people around them just aren't doing their work, or they're not dealing with their traumas or whatever, and they become a conduit, which is, you know, a host for these sorts of things.
And it can often be your ego that wants to step in to defend and to do this and all the rest of it. And
Exactly.
you really got to sit back and go, is this for the greater good, or is this my ego speaking that I need to do this for me? And, you know, I've got to make this right. And I think understanding that making it right by you reacting and doing those things is often not making it right.
No.
Might be times in which you shouldn't be reacting to make it right, or you should be, you know, talking about it in this way, or removing those emotions from it. Because I think often our ego wants to speak to, and we're taught this eye for an eye type situation.
Yeah.
There is a truth to that, but it doesn't necessarily mean that you need to step in to make that right. Sometimes, you know, the world, or whatever you want to say, if it's natural law or the spirit world or whatever, will make that right. But you don't necessarily need to make every situation right. That's often your ego talking.
Oh, you're actually robbing others of their opportunity to go through their own ascension process. Because if you're running around fixing everything for them, they're not doing any of their work. So, you know, it's selfish, actually. trying to help people too much can be an incredibly selfish act.
Yeah, absolutely. So what would be, so as we go through this, I think there's a real thirst for this topic now that's more than ever before, because we're searching for that understanding, that ascension, that closer to spiritual, that feeling fulfilled in what we do. But then there's this navigation between the crazy, the satanic, the crazy new age, whatever it is, and we have to be really discerning as to who we're following and what that is. And I think that that's an internal muscle, or a spiritual muscle, that we have to work on more so that we can feel what's going on. And a lot of people, what I've seen recently is that they're feeling these things, but then they often need that confirmation. Oh yeah, now I feel like I'm on the right track. So there's just this bit of doubt, rather than fully just trusting these inner feelings. They're still just doubting, and they need someone to come along and go, no, you're on the right path. But we also need to make sure that that person that's coming along to let them know they're on the right path is actually someone that they should listen to. So any ideas or thoughts on discerning and what to look for in making those decisions?
So, I mean, if you're, there's a lot of people, so in my opinion, we're in an education phase, a knowledge phase, and a healing phase of this war that's been going on, it's been going on for decades. So a lot of people are looking for others to sort of be an inspiration or to follow what has worked for them. And my suggestion would be, it helps if you can read people's auras. That's brilliant, because then you can feel the authenticity and you can see the authenticity. And that's as simple as, I always have a white background on purpose, because you can see my aura really clearly. You can see anybody's aura really clearly if they're against a white background. So, and it's just a matter of letting your eyes go out of focus and just seeing what comes up. First, you'll see the etheric, which is a fuzzy line around the head and the hair. And then if you're lucky and you practice, I mean, it's not lucky, it's practice, you'll eventually see the middle aura. The colors will come through, and they have meaning. So that's a benefit. So if you can do that, that's fantastic, and anybody can learn to do that. But aside from that, I would look for, is there anything ego about this person? Are they saying they're the only one that can teach you that? That's a number one red flag. Everybody's got something to share. Nobody knows everything. If you're interested in someone who's a reader that tells you that they're 100% accurate, it's ego. It's rubbish. Nobody's 100% accurate. I don't think there's anybody in history that's ever been that accurate. Look at how much of it seems to be about, I mean, honestly, these televangelists that you see that run around on stage talking about doing this and doing that, but they've got these huge mansions and so much money. I don't understand why people would follow something like that. It's so bizarre, but I guess they're very, very lost or something. Maybe they think that success means that they're actually doing the right thing. But, go with your gut feeling. Go with your gut. So, and who might be right for you to follow at one point might be completely wrong once you get to a higher level. That might not feel right at all, and you go for somebody else. So don't feel like you're stuck with somebody and you have to watch somebody all the time or listen to somebody. If as soon as it doesn't feel right, it might be that you've actually ascended past what they can offer you. And so then you might find somebody else that's got, that's of the right frequency that would then be of interest to you, because you're ascending or aspiring to reach that frequency. So that's some of the things that I would suggest.
Yeah, we had that, and the group sort of discussed this, but we had that with David Icke. He came on, and we tried to sort of go deeper with him, but there was nothing there. It was like he'd given everything, and what he'd given was everything that he'd already, everyone sort of knew already.
Okay.
It was like, not to dishonor like all the amazing work that he'd done in bringing that to that point, but it felt like, to keep going, you needed to then look elsewhere. That he was maybe there until a certain point for people, but then once you get to that point, you might need to look at that. And we can still respect and honor, it doesn't mean that they're less or anything else, because they've got a very important role. to help people at that stage. But then, yeah, you may need to look elsewhere to try to get to a further point.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I just really suggest people go with their gut. I've had people come to me and say, but I don't have a gut feeling. And which is so sad. And I really feel for them because they just don't trust it. But your gut feeling will tell you things, even if it to the point of it actually makes you feel nauseous. That's a gut feeling. So you get butterflies, or you get anxiety, or that there's a feeling in the body that tells you whether or not something is authentic. And if it's something that you want to listen to, and people can be authentic, but they don't necessarily have to be what you actually want to listen to at that point, because they might not match your frequency. They might not be, something to aspire to.
Yeah, I think sometimes for me, especially early on, where I didn't really understand, like listening to your gut, I always had a sense of right or wrong. But the part is of sort of removing yourself from the situation to sort of somewhat then remove the ego and ask yourself those hard questions. Am I doing it for money? Am I doing it for ego? Am I making this decision? Because sometimes those things cloud our ability to listen to right and wrong. And then, we often overthink what that outcome is. And that's what I think happened for a lot of people with the jab situation. Well, I've got this mortgage, I've got this, and I feel trapped and I have to go this way. But, there was a lot of people who chose not to go that way and then still succeeded by not doing that. So I think sometimes we can't really see the full thing of what we're meant to do, but we should have trust in, listening to that inner voice of what's right and wrong. Because I think we're born with that. I think unless you're a psychopath or a sociopath, you're born with this understanding. You know that you shouldn't be doing this, or that could be harming them. And if you think of just not doing harm, is this for the best interest for them as well as me? Is this for the best interest of everybody? Then if you start to remove yourself from that, then I think you can remove the ego, the chasing of the money, the whatever, the revenge or whatever emotion is getting in the way of you to assess the situation. And sometimes that can take a little bit of time. So trying not to react, give yourself some time, and then make your decisions and allow yourself just that extra time to feel it. Like, what does this really, once the emotion goes out of it, I think these days, most people, the emotion goes within about a week for most situations. And then you get a bit of a different perspective. You're like, oh, after about 7 days, if you look at the same situation again without sparking it up, and causing anything, but just remove yourself from that situation, you can then make a lot clearer decision.
Absolutely. And, if you look at the way that schools are sort of basically set up to rob children of that gut feeling, when you think about it, because you're left at some place that you don't want to be by your parents, and suddenly somebody else has got this right to tell you what to do, and your gut in that situation would be to run away and go home. But from that point, from being left at school, you're forced to forget and ignore the gut feeling that's saying, this isn't right. Where are my parents? Why am I being left in this place? Why do all these other children look so miserable? So, that indoctrination starts pretty young. Now they're doing childcare centres, it's just horrible. It's not normal.
To drop off a baby, and you can see that the baby's, a month, 2 months old or something, and you just, and look, my wife, and we're going to do a podcast on this. She's going to start to do some podcasts, but one of the things that she wants to talk about is that she felt like she had to go back to work. Now, we had our own company, so we took our kids in with us to work, but she was back there within a week of a Caesar, or it might have been less, it might have been a few days. But she felt compelled to sort of do that, to almost, I don't know, show that she could do that or prove to herself. And she regrets a lot of those decisions now of not, allowing herself that healing time, not allowing herself that, time. But that did allow me to also step up as a father and be, we would share that time. So there was a blessing in there as well. But it is interesting that what's forced upon us and the expectations, and then you're dropping off, your most precious thing that you could ever have in this world to somebody else to have those experiences, and you doing that because you need money. And when you look at it and step back from that, it's a really interesting revelation to see where your priorities are.
Yeah, and not to judge anybody who's had to do that either. You know, it's just sad that that's the normality now. That's just sad for little ones.
And therefore, you know, it's forced. I mean, the situation that most people are in financially, it's all manufactured and forced upon us. Like, I don't know how a lot of families are getting through right now with the cost of food and everything else. I'm very fortunate that we're able to afford the food and put, you know, when I swipe the card, that it actually works like that. I've been through that time in which that's not the case, and it's an awful feeling. And then to have to sacrifice either your time with your kids or the food in which you give them or the experiences that you have, you know, it's not, you know, I mean, it feels to me like it's almost, you know, having to sell your soul, like coming back to that. It's you're losing something to do that, and we shouldn't be put in that situation. And that's
we shouldn't.
By our fault.
Yeah. And again, it's by design, because it's only those people who are in those situations financially who have to do that. And so they're the ones that whose children, you know, go through that process, whereas the, you know, so-called elites, or those that have lots and lots of money, who aren't altruistic minded, that are just about money, that get forced to put the children in those situations because they can probably have a nanny or somebody come along and do it. So again, it's you know, those that have and those that haven't get a different paradigm to be growing up in, which is just terribly unfair.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I believe will change very soon. I think there's a shift coming with education, the judiciary, you know, the way food is created. There's a big shifts coming over the next couple of years. So, you know, we're going to see big changes.
Do you think because I have this firm belief that those who are attached to those bad things, you know, are not going to be rewarded like they used to be. Like, you know, I feel like you can't receive those gifts that are coming. And in saying that, we should be encouraging everybody to delve into their gifts and deal with their traumas and really level up as much as you can, because, you know, there's gifts that are available to you that are coming that, you know, maybe leveling up financially and all the rest of it. Maybe there's gifts in that part, but also the spiritual gifts and what that entails. I think we're in a time that we really should be active in that way and excited by what's coming. And I think that there's going to be a shift where all of those qualities in which weren't respected previously are going to be respected. That authentic, the honesty, the integrity, you know, all of these, you know, sharing love, doing that, they're going to be honored, where the greed and the, you know, the psychopathic, you know, things and all of those sorts of things that used to seem to help are not going to be rewarded in what's being created.
Yeah, you know, you can only have, and I've said this many times before, you can only have it skewed in one direction for so long, and it's been skewed in the satanic direction energetically for a very, very long time, some say thousands of years. This shift makes it impossible for them to have that upper hand anymore. And that's what I'm so excited about, and why I made such a big deal about us coming into this permanent harmony time and coming to this fifth dimensional frequency, because I know they just cannot succeed. They cannot have the sort of power, and they cannot have the same sort of remuneration, like you were saying, energetically or financially. It just will not work for them anymore. So that's what we've got. That's what we're coming into. The issue that we have is that all of those structures are going to crumble, and we need to replace them. So we need to be very clever about the way we replace them. And all I keep getting from my guides is it's going to be all community based. So we're all going to be working, and there's not going to be figureheads. There'll be committees that will be working together to make sure that things happen. It's going to be much more localized as well. So it's certainly not going to be going in a global direction, as much as they're desperate to do that. Whatever they're trying to do, what is actually going to happen and supposed to happen is the absolute opposite. So it's going to be much more local.
Yeah. I'm going to read through some of the chat and then get your opinion on some of it. Gillian said, folks are also being taught into believing that everything is their fault. I've just been spending time with family, good folks who have learnt that all the messes they watch on TV is their fault. Any thoughts on that?
Interesting, because that's what we're told. Because climate change, you know, it's our fault. You know, I guess that's leaning. Yeah. I don't think people are going to be thinking that for too much longer. I don't know if I've read that the same way.
Yeah, I see it also in the biblical text as well, is that if you look at that, there's an idea when you get into the religious aspect of the Bible and go down that we're all sinners.
Oh, born of sin, a little tiny baby born of sin. Oh my God.
Yeah, they're born, one day and they're born of sin, and then they're doing the what do you call it? The putting the water on the head stuff. And that's meant to remove their sin. Like, how could they possibly have sin? They've just been born. But then, if you understand the biblical text and go further, then that sin's already been paid for. So there's this conflict between that. And I think that we're actually at that part where that's already been paid for. And we just need to bring, what we bring. And we're not perfect. We're going to make mistakes along that way. But if we bring that right intent and we do those things, then that's what we're going to be judged upon.
Hypocrisy is just going to be so incredibly blatantly obvious. Just like you said, how can you be both things?
So I'm just going to go down. So that's why it's so deductive, because there is truth in it. The babies coming in now are incredible.
Yeah, they are.
I was just talking about this with two ladies after yoga. So synchronicity. So someone's just agreeing with whatever we're talking about at that time. Now let's go through. So do you think that, and just to touch on that, the babies that are coming through now, because they're not coming into the world and there's already, I guess they're coming in and they're probably meeting the frequency that's here. Would that be an assessment? And therefore their leveling up is going to be so much further. What's your thoughts there?
So they're at what I would describe as 9th dimensional frequency, the ones that are coming in, so much higher than the ambient frequency. But it's interesting that the mainstream media is trying to call this generation beta. And what have we had for so long? We get beta men, beta this, beta that, meaning secondary. They're not an alpha, they're a beta. They're trying to already denigrate these children. And it's hilarious, because these children are stellar. They should be calling them stellar, or, galactic or something amazing, because they're out of this world. The frequency is incredible. And for anybody who may have had a miscarriage before bringing a child in at this frequency at this time, be aware that these soul frequencies are so high that sometimes they can't manage, the fetus can't manage it to start off with. So, I just want to give those mothers and fathers the encouragement to know that just because that's happened doesn't mean that there's something wrong with you or there was something wrong with the baby. These frequencies are so high, fetuses can't necessarily cope, but usually they'll try a couple of times and then they'll come in. So, and when you've got a baby like that, when you see them, they have that 40-foot perspective. They're not completely different. They've still got all those baby traits, but there is just something otherworldly about them. It's not that they don't belong here. It's just that you can feel and see that the mission that they have is spectacular.
Yeah. And, for those that are on here, I don't think this is controversial, but jabbing them with vaccines the moment that they're born is often going to damage and remove their ability to get to those levels. So, it's controversial for those who believe in that stuff as that is. I think that is too much truth now to not say we need to avoid that stuff.
It's best not to do it, especially with these ones that are super, super high frequency. They're much more sensitive as well. So not to say that if they've done that, it can't be ameliorated. It's just best not to. If you can avoid it, it's best not to.
Yeah. One of the questions was just about the blood witches and dealing with the hexes spells. I think we covered that. Curious about the necklace, Dave, from Scotty. Yeah, the necklace is an EMF one. It's from the UK. I think it's got ancient water or your pure water inside as well. And it's meant to enhance your frequency. I got it at the start of COVID. I wasn't sure what was going on. I got one for the whole family and we all were wearing it. So I've worn it ever since. But the interesting thing was, I'm just trying to think now, because I played hockey and I put it on for the first time and I felt like a real heaviness on my chest when I was playing. And I was like, whoa, what is this? And I left it on. It went for a couple of days, but whatever it was, there was something that had to be moved or changed or inside me as I was doing that. So I did feel something for a couple of days when I first put it on. I don't feel anything these days or since. Sun gazing is amazing and an ancient Arabic practice, and someone just confirmed as well not to wear sunglasses as you're doing it. You can just sort of squint your eyes and look at the sun and just sort of get used to a little bit more. Yeah, someone's just confirming they look at the sun each day. So Steb is just saying, I see people's shadows much more clearly now. So seeing what that is, that's quite interesting. We're in a weird between time now. I can easily sense not needing things like computers, but yet we're still in a place where they need it, apparently. I actually had this conversation with someone today, one of our members, and we're talking about technology, and we're working on trying to remove ourselves from some of these technologies, but we also need some of them. And we're talking about the positive versus the negative. So how you're using the technology. And I feel it's more important to use it to get the message out to help more people than the negative of, paying that subscription to Zoom or to whoever who might be an evil entity at the end of the line. If I'm sharing a positive message that outweighs that, I still think at this stage we need to do it. But if there does become a time in which I've got something to replace it with, which we've been looking at constantly, then I will do that. But I'm not going to sacrifice getting the message out because then they ultimately, they're beating you at that game, right? Because if you look at it as an energetic war, it's more important for that than the small negative part of what they're doing. So any thoughts?
It's wonderful because you're using their tool against them.
That's right. Yeah. And they've done a pretty good job of doing it. So I'm not going to trying to rebuild everything straight away. But I do think that that's going to happen. I do think that as the need and the want is there, that also creates the desire for someone to step in and create the alternative. Right. That's where we have to really be working on that. You mentioned it before about, creating and, these communities and, what you're saying we need to do. We really need to be focused on creating the alternative, which is a lot of what we try to do here. Okay, what else have we got? Lots of tech issues with phone and connection issues. Recently, I saw people in black when I turned off the TV. What is this, Rachel? So I'm guessing that the TV was on, they switched it off, and then they could see an entity reflection off that TV.
Okay, so it's interesting. I was watching something on one of I like to watch ghost hunters and stuff, and I was watching something similar. So if you see something along those lines like that, I would also pay attention to the way your body felt, just to ascertain whether or not it's a shadow or something like that, or if you got that, that feeling when you get that, that's a sign that it's an entity. And in that situation, I would play really high frequency music. And if you can visualize it and imagine it, again, pixelating into gold dust and going back to source with that intent, you can get rid of it. There are different ways to clear spaces. A lot of people use white sage. I don't tend to use it because it's very smelly. If I want to do something like that, I'll use a tuning fork. 432 hertz works really well. You tap it and you just take it through the whole house with the intent, and you say, get out. Because if it's black, it's dark. There's no two ways about it. It's a dark entity. So you just tell it to leave. And you've got to have that strength of conviction that this is your space and it is not welcome. And that's what makes it go.
No fear, right? So like knowing that you have the strength to say that, knowing that your light is stronger than its, fear or darkness that it's trying to put onto you.
Yeah. And just, with the sound, make sure you get into every corner, open up cupboards, put it in there, take the sound frequency into the corners of the room, behind doors, that sort of thing. It can take a while to clear a space, but it also convinces you that you've done the work. And so you'll know that it's been removed. And follow that up with playing some 432 hertz music. Most classical music apparently is 432 hertz, but I would just look up classical music 432 hertz and see what comes up and see what's available, especially if it's familiar, and just play that for a while as well.
And there can be things or objects that this stuff can attach to as well. And I had this experience, and I was only I was worried about the highway that we lived on, because to get cheaper rent, we lived on a highway, and I had kids, and I was worried that if they went down, that they would get hit and it would be all over. So the people that I trust in this area, they can do some of these clearings and that sort of thing. I was talking to them about that, and they said, well, we can set angels there and we can set protection. And why don't we jump on a Zoom and you can take us around your house? And so I did that. I went around the house and I was showing them, and they were getting me to open up the cupboards and to do all of this sort of thing. And they got down the side of the house, and Jenny, who's owning power, she's like, there's something there. And it was the gas underfloor heating and the hot water system that was at the side of the house. And I was like, okay. And she goes, you need to get someone out there to check that out. And I was like, yeah, no worries. And like, I'm not going to call someone to come out and say, I think there's something wrong because some person who can see spiritually said there's something wrong, like, so I ignored it. And then it was probably about 6 months after we had the underfloor heating stopped working. And I called someone out then and said, it's not working. And they came and said, you don't know how lucky you are. And so it was a previous tenant had put, there was like a purple kid's jacket, and then there was a bunch of these playing cards that was right down near, and it's like a hot, a flame element next to the gas.
Oh,
and because of the suction or whatever was right next to it, they said, you almost had your whole house on fire. And I was like, so I went back to that individual and thanked them and told them I probably shouldn't have ignored their warning. It's interesting when those sorts of things happen, and you get confirmation. But yeah, there are opening up the room and doing that thing. And so that tuning fork's a really good idea. What do you think of salt?
Oh, apparently it's brilliant. It's not something that I've used much of, but apparently it's very, very good. Yep. So you can put a ring of salt around your house for protection, or you can use salt in, to clean crystals and things as well. But it's just not something that I tend to use.
And if there was something already existing there and you put salt in, does that then trap it in though?
It can, yeah.
Yeah. So anyway, I had an experience with one of my children, and they told me about salt. I just put salt everywhere. Energy goes where attention flows, just putting it into the field. The field listens. That's good advice. Deb's also said, I often do cord cutting. There's a bit of a discussion on there on cord removal, because like weeds, if you cut them, they can grow back, and just acknowledge that that's a good thought. Any ideas on the cutting or the removal aspects?
Again, I like to use a tuning fork for that. So you just ding it and usually go from the navel, because the navel is where usually the cords come from, sometimes from the heart, but I find the navel is the most powerful sort of place for the cords to come from. So again, umbilical cord, it's part of that. It's just an energy connection. Interestingly, you can't really cut it from your parents because you've come from them, and you can't cut it for your children. You can do clearings and cleansings, but they're the only ways or ones that are permanently kind of difficult to get rid of. The rest you can do. It's just the intent and the belief in it. So I would just with the intent say the words that you need to say to let that person go. Use the tuning fork to just wave across the navel, or put it in the navel if you want to, or whatever you want to do with the intention of doing that clearing. But then my suggestion is, do not send love and light to that person. If you want to cut your cords from them, don't send them love and light. It just reconnects it again. Don't obsess over them. Don't worry about them. Don't think about them constantly. That is how you create the connection again. Once you cut those connections, the idea is to have a clean, and this is really important for manifesting as well. You get to certain frequencies, and if you are thinking about something obsessively or thinking about something too much, and it's a negative thing, you can create it. So you have to really think about what consider what you really want to be thinking about. Don't constantly worry about stuff. Don't catastrophize, because you can bring those things closer to you. What you do is you recognize that you're doing it. Do not chastise yourself. Just recognize that you're doing it, and then imagine something you actually want to happen in its place and replace it with that thought. And never self-deprecate. Saying nasty things about yourself is never a good idea. Again, it's another form of really negative manifestation.
There's Susan has said, I've been noticing the lack of presence in people who have participated in several doses of a recent medical experiment. So I can see an aura. So that's someone else confirming that. I message, and I know as soon as I touch the body of someone who took the experiment, there is nothing there, massive inflammation, hard body, and there's nothing there, no feeling, like soullessness. And there is an aspect to that. I think, what was it? There was luciferius or something that was one of the ingredients, and there was a lot of people talking about that it was a removal of that. I'm not sure. I don't know on that whether it's. I think everything we can heal from.
Yeah,
I don't think that it's a lifelong thing, but I do think that we have to get to that trauma of why we chose those decisions and start to deal with that trauma so that we can then overcome it both physically and spiritually as well.
I get a sense. So I know that, every 10 years we've replaced every cell in the body. So my understanding, but the downloads that I get, it might take 6 years. And people, if they can get to that point, they probably will have gotten rid of most of what the damage is, if there is any damage at all. And what I think might be described there with them feeling soulless is, I think it's a disengagement. Like the soul's still there, but it's not fully in the body anymore. And it can come back in.
Yeah. I'm going to put it out because I don't want to keep you on here forever. I'm going to say for any other questions, because the questions keep piling up. So I don't think I'm going to get to the bottom of the list. But if anyone's got a question, want to ask Rachel directly, please pop your hand up and do that, and I'll just skim through them and see if there's anything that jumps out. But yeah, please raise your hand. Are you on a time schedule at all, Rachel? So
I've got another 15 or so.
Okay, all right, perfect. What else we got? I think we've covered most of it. Alexa's got her hand up. Alexa, welcome. You guys as well.
Hi, Rach.
Hey, gorgeous. Good to see you.
Good to see you too. I'm actually glad that you to put it out for questions, because I couldn't. It was going to be too much to type. I'm curious your opinion on, because I've been listening to like different podcasts and I've had my own experiences recently with narcissism. So I'm just curious what you think is going on spiritually with that, because there's a part of it where it's like, yeah, it's kind of like a personality disorder usually based on like repressed trauma and stuff. Yeah. But then spiritually, I do feel like there is also something there. Do you think that there are specific entities that attach that cause that behavior, or do you think that the behavior kind of attracts entities that aren't necessarily causing the narcissism but can come in for other reasons?
Really good question. So I only really learnt probably in the last year or so that narcissism can be caused by trauma, which is absolutely fascinating and makes so much sense of so many of my family members. But I do believe, because narcissism is there tends to be a lot of selfishness involved, and a total lack of consciousness of where they're going wrong and what they're doing wrong, and so much projection onto others of what they're actually doing themselves. So when you've got someone like that, even if they're not psychopathic, entities will attach, because it's a wonderful conduit, because they, these negative entities that attach to people, they don't want to do nice things. They want to harm others. And so they'll use them as a conduit to attack verbally or physically or whatever. Yeah.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah. Yeah. That's why I was like, there's got to be something spiritually going on, because in my recent experience, it's very narcissistic behavior, tendencies, personality. But then you can also see that there's definitely things attached that seem to be causing them to do other things that they didn't before.
Okay. Sorry to hear it, Dawn.
Yeah. Thank you.
Now is the time.
Yeah, well, I figured that too. I was like, with this shift, it's like you said, they can't hide anymore. So
yeah, it's full on. Yeah. So that's another thing that, thank you for bringing that up, because I'll mention that, because the entities that attach to people are not comfortable in this new frequency. So we're going to see a lot of really full on acting out with people as these entities just lose their grip. So it's just like, that tantrum energy again coming through. But they're not going to be able to stick around for too much longer. They'll have to go underground if they stick around here at all. It'll be underground. But they're usually more comfortable with the frequency underground.
There's a lot of links between narcissism and sociopaths as well. Those two are quite interesting. And I feel like as you go down that line in sociopathic and then psychopathic, I think there's a part, I don't know, to me, I could be completely wrong on this. I feel like there's a part where you can't come back in this realm. You can't. There's a line of crossing over where you can't be saved in that capacity or whatever. Whether that's true or not, I just feel like I've never been able to see and try to work with those sorts of people, and they go all of a sudden understand their mistakes, and here I am, and it's to me, I've always had to separate myself because I can't be around that sort of behavior. So yeah, I find that that's an interesting thing, and everyone throws those words around, which I hate as well. They're a sociopath. My mother-in-law is a sociopath, and they use these labels, which I think removes what they are actually. What we're describing, it's used a lot when it's not needed.
Yeah.
But I do think when they really are that, or that narcissistic stuff, is really difficult to get that removed or have that shift. I don't know.
Well, yeah, and it's interesting because a lot of people. So for me, the psychopaths, the true psychopaths, the ones that aren't just a conduit for some entity that's attached to them, the true psychopaths have what I would describe as a red aura. It's a crimson aura, and they're certainly not going to be able to, once this lifetime ends, come back in with that same frequency. So we're just going to get, it's interesting, I keep hearing about, I keep hearing psychics talk about the great dying off. And yes, we're going to lose people that can't come into this frequency for whatever reason. And some people don't want to come into this frequency, and they'd be the psychopaths. So we're going to lose a lot of dark souls that just don't want to be with us. And whether or not they've gone off to some 3D Earth that still exists and they think we've all died or what, it's still very interesting. I did see a really interesting vision when I was at Uluru during the solstice, and there was that bifurcation that I wasn't expecting to see that. I'd sort of had visions of that before, but it sort of was in real time. It was really interesting. So I think some people will go off and to us they're dead, but they're in a different timeline. They're on a different timeline in a different Earth, and we'll be at an ascended Earth. But the psychopaths in this frequency won't be comfortable. That's why we're seeing so much more acting out as well. It's just yeah.
There's a bit of conversation after the narcissistic part. So Alexa said, totally agree, Dave. I've never met a recovering or recovered narcissist. Cole said, narcissism may be caused by trauma, but invariably it's a choice. I just wonder if that choice allows you to come back, because I agree with what Alexa's saying, that I've never seen someone go, I'm a recovering narcissist. Here I am. I've learned all these lessons. Like, it doesn't
think I have
that way. But even if it is a choice, it seems to be a one-way choice. And Gillian said, it's certainly a choice to adopt any diagnosis or persona. So Gillian, you've got your hand up as well, so you might have something separate that you want to ask.
Yeah, what I wanted to ask, it was in relation, well, it was prompted by the question around about these little ones coming in at the moment. I've sensed they're really, it's like they're powerful, but they need to be, protected is not the right word, but they need to be looked after, because they need to be supported. I think that's the right word. Because they're hit, there's so they are powerful, but it's a sort of contradiction, isn't it? But and just in terms of, because I've got, I've got some of these ones in my family, and they're all getting lined up to get injected. Because I've tried speaking, and it's weird, because my family generally is non-conformist, but for some reason or other, this whole thing has taken them in. But it was just prompting me to the whole time thing, because time is much more fluid in my experience than we get taught into believing. So this whole idea of linear time, would suggest that once something happens, then there's consequences from that. But I don't sense that I sense that it's much more fluid, and we're able to go back before that, if that makes sense, when it suits us to do so.
So yeah, see, this is the thing. Time in a fifth dimensional situation is even weirder than when it was before. So I've been having reports of people saying that they'll be standing on a street corner. One former course member came to me and said, she was with somebody on a street corner, and this person said that she'd had this experience where she stepped forward, she was in another dimension. There were all these horses and carts around, and she stepped back, there were cars. She did this many times, apparently about 30 times. And the course member came back and told me about it. I was like, wow, that's really freaky. And within a week, similar stories have been told to me. So we are in a really weird paradigm. I do get a sense that whatever might happen with your little ones in your family, they're very strong. So in your situation, it would be ideal if it didn't happen, but it sounds like it's going to. Maybe it's because you're in their lives that you'll have some positive effect, some way to make it different.
Yeah, I sense it. I mean, it's easy to get hooked into this belief that it has to be a certain way, but actually, I sometimes step back and who am I to choose anybody else's path, whatever it is.
Yeah, like we were talking about before.
Even if it's literally walking off the cliff, to have the experience of walking off a cliff, that's not my choice to interfere with that. And I'm not meaning in the Buddhist way of letting everything die horribly.
Yeah.
I'm just thinking of the dogs in Thailand. They won't interfere with them, and it's not nice. But yeah, so it's yeah, I think the who am I question is quite useful in certain contexts. But I think the time thing is quite interesting. The other thing I had just jotted down, I've always, because I think it may be a similar thing to the thing you're saying about stepping forward and back into supposedly different timelines, or time things. What I understood it to be is almost like, the sort of idea of the glamour, the sort of the spell that creates something that generally looks much more attractive than it is behind it. I saw a photo of Michael Douglas recently, and he looked like Wurzel Gummidge. Sorry, that's a British character, but a scarecrow. And I'm sitting there thinking, and it's only a few years back, he looked very suave and, older but attractive. And I thought, whoa, it's almost like, I think there's a Disney movie, isn't there, with the witches, and they basically, their spells start failing and they start really looking ugly. And are you seeing more of that now?
Well, certainly with these so-called elites all over the place. And some of it's terrifying. So I do think it's partly the glamour. I think it's also the missing out on the party substance that they were used to having.
Yes, I know.
And various other reasons. Some of them, it's not the original, because I still think that some are using their brand because they've died or they've run off somewhere because they know that the music's coming. There's a lot already. I mean, our reality at the moment is just bizarre.
Yes.
I laugh a lot of the time because seriously, they really think, and I'll say to people, that's the same person, and they'll say, yes, it is. And it's like, what?
And politicians, I think it's hilarious. I mean, what's his name that does Twitter? That's not Twitter. That's formerly known as Twitter. I mean, he looks like he's got a plastic face on him. It's just the weirdest thing. And then people are thinking this is real. Anyway.
Yeah, it's uncanny. Yeah, and the new Zuckerberg that's getting around, I don't know what that is. It's just not the original.
I know. Okay. No, thanks ever so much. Okay.
Thanks, Julian. So, Rachel, we've got a couple of minutes to go. I want to give you the opportunity, as always, to give us an update on what you're working on, what's coming up, anything in your world that our world people need to be aware of.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Lay Love Down's still going fast and furious. So we've got people connecting all over the world now, which is really exciting in many, many different countries. Ben and I have had a bit of a hiatus because I was off at Uluru and he's just had his wife's just had a new baby, so had a little bit of a break, but we're jumping straight back into it in January, so there'll be more meditations. I'm still running my courses. I'm not so much doing taking on any new reading clients at the moment because I'm just too booked far ahead. But if anybody's interested in doing a psychic development course, I want to learn how to read an aura or how to see a ley line, and energetic protection, all of those sorts of things. Manifesting, I do that in my course. So I've got one starting up in February if anybody's interested.
Perfect. We'll add the links to the bottom so that everyone can find you. And I love this conversation. It feels like the 2 hours went really quick for me. And it was great. I love going into this stuff. I find it really fascinating. I think that we're in such an exciting time in the world, and we should really be embracing it for exactly that. We should be getting excited because I think a lot of the traumas, a lot of the things that we've maybe grown up to experience is not what's coming forward if we embrace them and if we look at it in the correct way.
lots to look forward to.
Any parting words?
I'll just thank you for having me. I really appreciate it. It's lovely. I enjoyed this.
Thanks, Rachel. We'll love to get you back on at some stage and have another chat. So thank you again.
Thank
and
you.
thank you everyone for joining and contributing.
Thank you.
Thanks, Rach. Thanks, Dave.
See you guys.